So, Raised by Wolves on HBO Max, which is going to start airing every Thursday morning at 3 a.m. So, those of you on the West Coast can watch it at 12, but the rest of us are probably going to be sleeping. It just released its first 3 episodes, and I have thoughts, but before I get into those, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I'm going to be doing upcoming weekly reviews of The Boys and Away and other shows. And if you'd give me a like, I'd really appreciate it. So, getting into my thoughts on Raised by Wolves. So, I felt like the first episode really was intriguing and very cinematic and strong, and it ended on a super exciting note. But then the next 2 episodes kind of brought things back down to earth, and it was the changing of the guard as director Ridley Scott passed the directorial baton on to his son, Luke Scott. Ooh, talk about nepotism. That was when things really started to slow down and become less interesting for me. It still wasn't bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm still going to watch this show with interest, but my initial hopes for it have been slightly reconsidered as the second and third episodes kind of slowly moved away from that high that I felt at the end of the first episode. It's really hard to summarize this show, especially without giving spoilers, because it's really interesting to experience it without knowing anything, and I highly recommend that you go in knowing as little as possible. I think, though, that the best way to summarize it, if you haven't watched a trailer or anything, just briefly, is that there is this pair of androids that call themselves mother and father, and they travel to this distant planet called Kepler 22b, and they have with them these little embryos which they implant in the mother, and they try to raise these children as their own. And they're doing this on the behest of their former owners, who were atheists, and they want to see these children raised as atheists because they lost this war with this religious group that was going on, and the survivors have all fled from Earth on arcs. So that's the general setup. The inciting incident in the first episode, I would argue, is when some members of the religious group show up on the planet and crash the party, and we get to see what Mother is willing to do to keep her the ones in her charge away from this group, to keep them for herself. And right from the get-go, there's some pretty astonishing visuals. Ridley Scott obviously brings a strong aesthetic style. He can do this kind of detailed world building in his sleep, and he's working in the first episodes with his often collaborator as a cinematographer, Darius Wolski, and they definitely make you think of Prometheus and Alien Covenant and a lot of the other sci-fi that Ridley Scott has worked on. And I definitely admired the look of it, although I do think it is a little bit of a look that we've seen a lot of. So for some people, I think it might be a little bit overdone, but I don't mind the kind of the washed out, very stylized look myself. Great special effects. There's some very viscerally exciting scenes when Mother turns into goes, let's just say, warrior mode to protect her brood. And I find the exploration of the ideas pretty interesting. I think that the writer Aaron Guzikowski's script is pretty strong. Now, he's not a very prolific writer. He's best known for creating the show The Red Road, which starred Jason Momoa, and for writing the film Prisoners, which is an excellent film, by the way. So I'm not turned off at all by his writing credits. Here he starts off very strong. I think the pilot episode is a great pilot episode, and I think so many pilot episodes these days rely on the developing story to pull you in and don't really give you a good pilot episode. But I think that the pilot episode's strength and how quick and to the point it was part of what made the next two episodes such a letdown, because it started to feel that mid-season sag almost immediately, whereas the first episode was very lean, mean, and brutal. And what I like about the script is it's interesting that it's not really vilifying religion so much as it's talking about the harm that zealotry can cause. And when you realize that zealotry can take many forms, for instance, Mother is very unsubtly worshipful of her former masters, and that's why she does everything she does without consideration. She's willing to go to almost any length to, protect and to guard what she's been charged with guarding. And Amanda Collin does a fine job in this role. I don't actually think that she is a magnetic performer. I think that what helps her here is the setup and the special effects that they're working with. But I do think that she plays the part well, and his story is a lot more interesting when her character is on screen, less so when she isn't. I feel that the problem with this show starts really in the second episode, but it really becomes clear in the third episode that as they move away from the inciting incidents in the first episodes and the initial setup, it becomes obvious that this isn't going to be as well paced from here on out. And there's a lot of backstory to establish. Some of it is interesting, some of it less so. But there's more scenes of raising children and of discussing things in a fairly on-the-nose fashion than there are scenes of real psychological interest and of real horror. There are some visceral moments in the next two episodes, but not nearly as many as in the first episode. And Luke Scott is the director of Morgan, and when he takes over for his dad in episode 3, that's when things really start to slow down, because he's just not as competent a director as his father. He's not incompetent by any stretch of the imagination, but you definitely just feel that the show has lost a lot of its edge after Luke Scott takes over for his father. I think that there are some interesting ideas in the script. I like the moral ambiguity of a lot of it. I think that helps to sell the story, and it keeps it very, very unpredictable, because you really don't know who is in it for the long haul and who is good and who is evil. But I think that the moral ambiguity kind of hurts the show a little bit, because it kind of leaves you with no one to root for. In the slow fashion in which the story unfolds just kind of becomes a problem, because you wish you knew more about the characters so that you could care more. I would argue that all of the younger actors, and especially the children, are kind of dull and not very interesting, and their performances only work marginally well enough to sell the plot lines that they're given. And pretty much any time that it's just kids on screen, I felt like it was dead space in the script. I just wasn't interested. And I felt that Kepler 22b, it was intriguing, of course, but I feel like it would be helpful if the script would kind of dole out more answers more quickly about this planet. I think that it's interesting at first because it's mysterious, but as the script doesn't give you any more hints about the nature of this planet and what's going on very quickly, it starts to become less interesting, and especially as the cinematography and directing become less impactful, I think that the planet becomes less impactful. Travis Fimmel is very, very good here. Not as good as he was in some of his other leading roles, but I think that he just brings a welcome, charismatic presence as this leader within the religious group that arrives at this planet, which he has some secrets that get revealed pretty quickly, but again, trying to avoid spoilers in this review. But I felt that every scene with him on screen was relatively interesting, just because I think he brings a lot of charisma. I liked the actor playing father, which is Abubakar Salim, but he felt like one of the androids in Humans more than... he didn't really feel like the same kind of android that Mother was from the beginning, which Could be intentional. I'm not really sure. Overall, I'm interested in this show. I'm definitely going to keep watching because I have hope that the finale is going to be as exciting as the first episode. That's often how these shows go. Kind of have a really exciting intro and have a really exciting finale, but then everything in between is a little bit slower and less intriguing. I feel like a lot of people are going to like this show, especially fans of hard sci-fi. Overall, like I said, I'm interested to see future episodes. If it was just the first episode, I would give this show a B+, but because the second and third episodes dulled my enthusiasm for it somewhat, I would say I would give it a B- personally. But those are just my thoughts for what they are worth. If you have thoughts, please share them in the comments. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of this show and others, please consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, you can watch more videos right now.